like to call the work session to order for April 4th, 2022. Will the city clerk please read the roll call?
Let the record reflect that all members are present.
Thank you. We have one item on the agenda. Remind council that the staff will be pausing intermediately to answer any questions. Presentation by the homeowners, Home Arizona, on the current state of the greater Phoenix housing market. And Harry, if you go ahead and introduce your guests that are going to be speaking.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's my privilege to be here tonight to introduce to you two individuals from Home Arizona. You may know that Home Arizona is a local nonprofit founded by Arizona business owners to study the gap or the housing supply gap that currently exists. They'll share information that they've found and also suggest ways that we can address the need for additional housing here in the greater Phoenix market. This evening we have with us Nico Howard and Elliot Pollock with Home Arizona to discuss the current state of housing here in the greater Phoenix market. Their presentation will be approximately 25 minutes, and which will also allow plenty of time for questions and answers. With that, we'll ask Nico and Elliot to come forward.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let me just start by saying thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you this evening. We're very honored to be here and very excited to share a little bit about our message. Now, I've been spoiled over the last months by Zoom meetings. I just got to read my script, so I'm going to attempt to put a little bit more showmanship behind it now that I actually have to look at real faces. My name is Nico Howard, and I am one of the co-founders of a group called Home Arizona. And at Home Arizona, our goal is to advocate for the development of quality and safe living spaces for all of Arizona's employees and their families. I am extremely grateful and extremely fortunate to be joined on my founding board by an exceptional group of both business and civic leaders. A couple of names that you might recognize: Paul Johnson, the former mayor of Phoenix; Jen Daniels, the former mayor of Gilbert. I like to call him everybody's favorite economist, Elliot Pollock; Wendy Riddell, name partner at Barry Riddell, and a number of other really exceptional people that are working on this issue. And Elliot has put together a terrific presentation to share with you some of the data that we've been looking at. But before I turn it over to him, I just wanted to say a couple of words about how our group came into being. And we have really coalesced around two separate but very closely related issues. The first issue is that we are seeing housing costs rise at an unsustainable and unprecedented rate. And we'll talk a little bit more about the numbers, but over a 12-month period, we saw the cost of housing rise by over 30%. And I'm going to say that one more time, just to let that sink in. Over a 12-month period, we saw the cost of housing for our residents rise by over 30%. So that's issue number one. The second issue that really brought us all together is it is getting harder and harder to hire good people at our companies. And we're seeing that personally with our own companies. We're also seeing it in the data. And I think that maybe it's an experience that you good folks share as you try to hire at your city. It's just getting harder and harder to find good people. And if these two issues persist, it will ultimately cause a real hardship to community economic development as we go forward. And the ultimate consequence or the ultimate form that that takes is that major employers like TSMC, Intel, Core Power, they will stop moving here or they will stop expanding their existing operations here. And as I mentioned, we've been watching the rent numbers, the housing appreciation numbers very closely over the last 12 months. I mentioned that we've seen over a 30% increase. Now, that's really alarming to us, but it sends a very clear message. And that message is we are undersupplied relative to demand. We just don't have enough housing units for the number of people that are living here, moving their families here, expanding their families here. And when anytime that you see supply is low relative to demand, you're going to see big increases in pricing and you're going to see a huge decrease in affordability. Now, a lot of folks will look at this and say that is specifically just an affordability issue, and affordability is absolutely a huge component of it. but it's really a community economic development issue in disguise. And I'll tell you why. When a major employer looks at relocating to a new market, they're looking at really one thing that they look very closely at is the ability to attract and retain key talent. And that really comes down to two questions. The first question is, are there enough people in the existing workforce that I can hire those people today and meet my company's needs? And though these major employers will bring a lot of jobs to the area, oftentimes it is the case that they do have to bring some employees from other places. So if a TSMC needs 2,000 engineers, maybe 1,500 of them come from the Phoenix MSA, but maybe 500 of them come from, you name it, Los Angeles, Palo Alto, Austin. We have to bring that workforce in from elsewhere. And when we're talking to those employees, those potential employees that might move here, one of the first things that they're looking at is, what is the cost of housing in the Phoenix MSA? Can I afford to live there? Do I want to live there? Do I want to bring my family there? Historically, they've come for a couple of reasons: great quality of life, great cost of living, and great job opportunities. But as we lose that cost of living component, those employees are less likely to relocate here. And simply put, if enough of those employees stop coming to the Phoenix MSA, eventually major employers will stop coming to the Phoenix MSA. And so what starts as an affordability and as a fairness issue really quickly evolves into a labor availability and community economic development issue. And so that's kind of what our group is about at a very high level. Like I said, Elliot's gonna give you a great presentation to actually prove out some of that in the numbers, but that's kind of an overview. At this time, I'll turn it over to him. I just want to say thank you so much again for having us here tonight. My name is Nico Howard, and our group is Home Arizona. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nico.
Thanks. I'm Elliot Pollack. It's nice to be here. I appreciate you willing to listen to us. I guess the other thing that Nico should have mentioned perhaps is that every one of us who are doing this are doing it voluntarily because we see a problem and we want to deal with that problem. So let me go through this, give you some background, and I'll go through a lot of these pretty quickly. The first decade of this century was a decade of overbuilding housing. Since 2008, it's been now 14 years of underbuilding housing. We now have the lowest vacancy rates nationally in home ownership and in rental that we've ever had. Same thing is true for Arizona. We have the lowest vacancy rate in apartments we've ever had, and as low a vacancy rate in housing as we've ever had. And one of the reasons is, in the first decade of this century, in Greater Phoenix, we built 487,000 housing units. Second decade, we built 240, basically about half as many. Now, while population was slower in the second decade, it wasn't that slow. It was about 30% slower compared to a 50% decline in housing. And this decade, it looks like it's going to be about 900,000 people who move to the Greater Phoenix area. And so that leaves us in short supply. This is the 14th year in a row. The only thing you have to understand is that the red lines, and sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't, but the red lines where there's a spread between the purple and the green, that's years in which there were more housing formations than there were housing delivered to the market. So really, since 2008, we have been under-delivering to the market, and it's finally caught up to us. Employment, the outlook still looks good, and for Greater Phoenix, 2022 will be a good year. 2023 should be a decent year. Population should continue to grow as people come here. We're getting about 90,000 new residents a year, including births over deaths. But it's who those people are that really affects housing. The mode is the stuff I've circled in red, and that's where the largest number of people are. And as you would expect, it's the millennial generation, and they're getting older. Basically, for the most part, this year about 27 to 32, and that's prime home buying age. And that big bump is now facing the housing market. I'm going to give you an example of it. The red line, the horizontal red line is home purchase loan applications. The blue lines, the vertical lines are age. And you can see where things stand now. Basically, this is last year, but basically this year, 26, 27 to about 32 is that big bump. This is what it looks like today. This is what it's going to look like in 5 years. They will have entered prime home buying years. And so there's going to be an awful lot of demand for housing, more so than just the population numbers will let you believe. And as people get older, the propensity to buy a house increases, and especially in your 20s and 30s. That's the biggest increase in the propensity to buy housing. So you've got a lot of people, and you've got a lot of them at the age where they're going to be buying housing. Surprisingly enough, the percentage of people 18 to 29 still living home with mommy and daddy has not been higher than this since the Great Depression. 46% of, I won't even call them kids, people 18 to 29 are still living home with mommy and daddy. At some point, mommy and daddy are going to say, go get a job and get out of here and start your life. And that's likely to be this decade. So this is a source of demand that we haven't even been able to factor in because we don't know how many people that will be. But we do know this, that the long run average of supply of month supply of inventory in the Phoenix Multiple Listing Service is 66 days. Today it's 17 days, basically about a fourth of normal. And if you're looking for a home under $350,000, there is a 5.2 day supply, basically non-existent supply. And inventory at new home subdivisions, which is usually about 2,500 units, 18 months ago was down to 1,600. Today it's 455 units. So if you go to a subdivision and say, I'll take your home, they're going to say, what home? It's just not there right now. And in addition, to meet the demand of the 90,000 people a year who are going to be here, this assumed that interest rates did not go up a lot. Just to meet the demand for apartments, you need 13,000 units apartment units a year, and to fill the hole that we'll talk about, what it's going to take to get vacancy rates back to normal, so you get these ridiculous price increases behind us. That's going to take probably another 3,000 units a year for 5 years. So the Valley really needs about 16,000 apartment units a year or rental units a year, and that might be going up for reasons we'll talk about in a minute. Unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to deliver that. There are 4 reasons why housing has difficulties now. One obviously is a supply-demand factor, but to meet that demand, it's been more regulation. Cities have been overwhelmed by the demand, and essentially it was almost impossible to plan for. And you've got the same problems that every engineering firm is, and that everybody's taken. It's difficult to find people. It's just an unusual situation. There's also the fact that a lot of the labor during the Great Recession and the housing bust left and has not come back. And then you've got supply chain issues. And those two will change over time, but it's a real difficult situation. All right, so where is there a problem? Well, entry-level housing, move-up housing, market rate housing, workforce housing, low-income housing, and extremely low-income housing. This, unlike other housing issues in the past, the current shortage is in all types of housing, at all price levels, and at all income levels. But housing is like a ladder. If you're pretty well off, if you're very well off and prices go up, maybe you give up some things, but you still end up in a nice house. As you get closer to middle income, well, now you're going to end up in a house that maybe you don't like at all, or maybe you're going to end up renting because you just can't afford it. Lower income, it becomes a real issue because those people will tend to fall off the ladder and become homeless. And if you take a look at where homelessness is the greatest, it's where affordability is the worst throughout the country. Now, as Nico said, both apartment rents and single-family resale prices increased. There's lots of measures, but they're all between 25 and 30%. There's one that's 32% for housing. But no matter what it is, they're all 4.5 to 6 times the rate of inflation. That only happens when there's a huge supply-demand imbalance. Okay, so let's take a look at affordability, because I think this will bring it home for you. In the fourth quarter of 2015, 70% of the people in Greater Phoenix could afford families in Greater Phoenix could afford the median priced house. That's good. Median simply means 50% above, 50% below. So if 70% could afford it, that's great. Well, let's take a look at how that developed. By the fourth quarter of last year, it was down to 44%. So we decided I'm going to pass on this one, but let me just digress for a second and say that a 1% change in interest rates is the same thing as a 13.5% or 13.2% increase in price in terms on the payment. So at a 3.15% interest rate, which was the interest rate in the fourth quarter of last year, the payment on a $400,000 home was $1,719 in principal and interest payment. If it was 4.15%, and you only had $1,750, you can only afford a $353,000 home. So what you can afford diminishes greatly when interest rates go up. So we took a look at this. We said, okay, let's say housing prices increase 15% this year, which looks like a certainty, then 10, then 8, and then 6, and interest rates were at 4%, which is below where they are now. They're now close to 4 3/4. Affordability continues to plunge. By the end of this year, it'll be in the 20s, and by the end of next year, it could be in the teens. That's California-esque, let's put it that way. And we ran several of these scenarios to see if there was any way out. We did one at 15, 8, 2, and 0, and you end up with affordability in the high teens, low 20s. And we said, okay, let's be really optimistic, say 15 this year, and then housing prices stop going up. You have affordability dropping to the 20% range this year and next, and bouncing back to the mid-30s, which by historic standards is still horrific. So there's simply no way out, given the current circumstances. We also went back and took a look at housing since 2000. Housing prices have essentially gone up 198%. That was essentially funded because incomes went up 50%, but because interest rates went down 61%. They went from a little over 8 to, at the bottom, a little under 3. I don't think there's anybody in this room who believes that's going to happen again. If rents, let's talk about what it costs to rent. If rents continue to go up at 10%, which compared to the 24% you had last year seems pretty low, but by the end of 2026, you need a $100,000 income to qualify for a median-priced apartment. But on the other hand, if you start getting lower increases, you'll need income in the 70s by 2026. So again, it becomes an issue. We took a look at 11 cities in the valley. Goodyear is the 5th line down. We took a look at the pay for nurses, police officers, firefighters, teachers, chefs, people who work or waiters, and people who are retail clerks. Okay, and let me tell you what this shows. The top group of cells is 2020, and what that shows is if it's in green, the median price, each of those people can afford the median priced home. So in 2020, the only people who could afford the median priced home in Goodyear were nurses and police officers. The yellow is those who could afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And the orange is people who could afford a 1-bedroom apartment, and the red are people who could not afford either a median-priced home, a median-priced 2-bedroom apartment, or a median-priced 1-bedroom apartment. And take a look at the bottom set of cells. Take a look at all the red, and that's September of 2021 compared to September of 2020. That's before you had increases in interest rates. We're going to do it again when we get the March data, but you can see in 1 year the vast extensive deterioration in what's affordable for your essential workers. It's a difficult situation. All right, so how does this play out? Fewer potential buyers. What's going to happen because of this? There'll be fewer potential buyers that can afford the median-priced house. There'll be fewer people who own and more who will rent. More rental of single-family homes. They'll be doubling up of either families or individuals. more millennials and Gen Zs living with parents, but also more parents living with their kids. Homes are going to become, and this is a fait accompli at this point, homes will become smaller and more dense, and you're going to see more cluster product because that will be help toward affordability. There's going to be less workforce housing, and so the question is, where do essential workers live, and where do all your new employees live? C&D apartments, there are going to be fewer of them as they're renovated, and they're going to, the ones that exist will have get less maintenance. There's going to be more homelessness, but the worst part is that as bad as all this is, there's going to be a worsening economic development picture as the ability to draw in employees diminishes. There's going to be upward pressure on wages and city budgets, and there's going to be slower growth in the economy as a whole, and that means jobs and real income. So nothing good comes out of this. So, like I said, there are 7 things you can do to deal with the housing shortage, and here's what they are. That's the 7 things you can do to deal with the housing shortage. It's simply a question of getting more units built as expeditiously as you can. There is no other solution, nothing that works, that has worked anywhere else. And again, let me talk about the whole for a minute. We need 36,000 units to meet the 90,000 people who are going to be coming to town every year. But we've got a big hole. How big a hole? We think you need about 25,000 units of for sale product in MLS to essentially get inventory back to normal levels. You need 16,000 more rental units to get vacancy rates back to where the pressures on apartments are off. Builders need another 2,500 units in their subdivisions. There's replacement of demolished units. It's about 1,000 units a year. And we haven't even figured in the pent-up demand from those millennials who are now 18 to 29 living at home. So not only do you need the 36,000 units a year in the Valley to meet the demand, but you need to exceed the annual number by roughly 45,000 units over the next few years just to get things back to where you're going to get away from these ridiculous price pressures. And again, the only solution to us is a housing shortage, or is a more housing. The only solution to the housing shortage is more supply. So again, the key takeaway, affordability has fallen, but right now it is plummeting is the only word for it. It's fallen through the floor. There's virtually no vacancy or available supply. Those of you who have kids or grandkids looking for houses, you all know this because they're coming to you and complaining. Supply has not kept pace with demand. Our success in attracting jobs and people has not been matched with a sufficient housing supply that new employees need, and a continued shortage of housing will drive up cost and threatens economic development efforts. I wish I had better news for you, but you know, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Who wants to start off? Anybody? Laura? Oh, right here?
No, I'm
No?
not ready.
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you both for the presentation. I think this is very important. And I think it's important that we get these numbers out to our citizens because in Goodyear, we've basically had really no apartments. So we're going like from 0 to 60 trying to get stuff built. We just didn't have the multifamily in our community before at all. So we get a lot of blowback about, you know, you hear this, the crime, the multifamily. And I think this is important to let them know that these are units for the people that are going to, that we want in our community. So I think that's very important. And you brought up the very good issue. My kids are in college. I don't want them living with me forever. I love them dearly, but I want them to have their own home that's affordable. And when you go on like realtor.com, you can see that, you know, you can't get much for under almost $500,000. And that's wrong. So I don't know. I know we're trying to get more online in our city. And I don't know, this might be a staff question. What are our percentages of what's coming online, what's future online? And I mean, how are our percentages looking as composed to the whole Phoenix area? I know it's whole holistic as the whole area, but for our little cosmic here, what else can we do or how are we doing?
I can get you that. And you always get these complaints about apartments. people don't build C and D apartments. People build, all this new apartment stuff is going to be A stuff. In fact, a lot of the rents might be higher than owning a house.
And that's what we always try to bring up, that it's, so that's more than your rent.
Yeah.
I mean, that their rent is more than some people's mortgage, and they're beautiful apartments. We just don't have enough.
Yeah, and the nature, you've done such a good job economic development-wise, you need them because of the nature of the employees you're getting. So it's a problem, you know, and I will get you whatever backup data you need to back that up. Unfortunately, because of, you know, let me ask, how many people in here have ever lived in an apartment? Most people, okay? Most people have lived in an apartment at some point in their life. It's a transition. For people my age who want to sell their home and take the equity and live off that equity, they try to get a nice place to rent. Some people like it as a lifestyle. Unfortunately, the movies portray it as, excuse the expression, basically bikers and pole dancers. You know, not that I have anything against pole dancers.
They need a place to live too.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it's that stereotype. But I can get you data on what renters really look like. Most people wish their neighbors were that quality, let's put it that way.
No, I agree with you 100%, and I agree we need to build more, and I just would like to know how we can facilitate it with our community and get the message out, because I think it's a lot easier when our residents also, if we can share your slides and share those with the community to say, hey, this is a problem. We're talking about teachers. You want the teachers to teach your kids to be in the community with your kids.
Yeah.
So if we can share, if you're okay, we can share those with the community and stuff, I would appreciate it.
Sure, anytime. I'll
Thank you
get
so
that.
much.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for the data and the information here as well. Yeah, I do agree more housing needs to be built across all of Arizona. And I know it's going to be holistic with every city, not just Goodyear can't do it all on its own. So, but I had a question on just some of the data around, I know you did Greater Phoenix. So we're the farthest, I feel like we're the farthest away from the city center with the piers. And I know the solution is going to be building more, but I was just curious, the old real estate slogan, drive to qualify. I'm just curious if it's forcing all of these service nurses and firefighters to go farther out from the city center, which I imagine they are. I was just curious if there's any data to support that.
Well, yeah, I can get you all the data that backs this up, but essentially, we took a look at every city and see what the pay was for these type of people in each city, and get some idea of if they could afford at least a median price place to live.
Yeah.
So I can get you all the backup data you need.
Yeah, my point is I just imagine that they're all they're driving to qualify. They're trying to find places. They're in Tartesso, or they're in
Yes.
Coon Creek, or they're in the Florence, or they're trying to be other places to try to find that affordability.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but no, it doesn't take away from the fact that we need more housing. I was just
Yeah.
curious if you've seen people driving to farther and farther for more affordability. So,
Well, it's anecdotal. I don't have any data.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, you know, I can get you the drive time data, though.
yeah, I mean, yeah. So, no, I appreciate it. Like I said, I hear you beating the drum that we need more housing. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys combining the nonprofit to rally the troops to
Yes.
get the message out as well. So
Yeah, again,
But,
this is bad for everybody, but the people
It
who are
is,
closer
yeah.
to the bottom of the ladder, that's really dangerous situation.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I have a neighbor. They can't find one right now. They got into a house from rent. A landlord is not a very good landlord, so they won't pay for anything to fix the house up at all. So they're really struggling. So yeah, it's definitely a symptom of lack of housing. So no, it's not a question. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Say again?
Councilmember
Thank
Stitt.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stitt.
Turn it on for it to work. Elliot, Nico, thank you for the presentation. Unfortunately, this has not changed much since we saw you at the league in August. The numbers haven't gotten any better, which is really kind of sad. One of the things that, I think we're struggling with, not just the city of Goodyear, but just in general, is really defining what is affordable anymore. you know, are we trying to get affordable for the person making 25,000 a year, or is affordable now you have to be making 85,000 a year? And you know, kind of as a region, where do we go with that? One of the things that, matter of fact, I just wrote my In Focus magazine council piece over the weekend, and it kind of talks about the growth that the city has had, and mentioning in that we are really responding to the market with the apartments and, you know, creating the jobs so people don't have to travel, they don't have to consume a lot of their income in travel. And just reminding our residents that we aren't trying to solve the housing problem in the valley, but we are trying to be part of the solution. And I think our track record of approving multifamily has been pretty aggressive in comparison to some of our other partners. And I think to Councilmember Loretano's point, we were way behind. But that doesn't mean that we've given away the farm either. And holding that quality and making it a place that both the residents who own property here and those that rent are proud to be here.
You are in a difficult situation, because if somebody is opposed to a project, they're going to be here. You're going to get an email from them. You're going to get a text message from them. On the other hand, a guy who's either indifferent or doesn't care or likes it, he'll be home Thursday nights watching a football game. Yeah. So we did some polling, and the result of that polling was surprising, and I think it's going to become a major issue by election time, in that 80% of those polled, I think was that the number, 80%? 80%. Yeah, said that the housing has become a major issue for them. Oh, yeah. And a major issue in the valley. So soccer moms aren't talking about COVID anymore. They're talking about, you know, housing and what are we going to do, and how am I going to get a bigger house, or how's my kid going to live near me? I can't even rent an apartment. What rents are today. What are we going to do about that? So that, you know, hopefully will give you some, I hate to use the word cover, but that's essentially what it is, to understand that there are a lot of people out there. I mean, 80%, you can't get 80% of people to agree that the sky is blue. So, you know, it's going to, you know, we'll get you those numbers. It's really impressive.
Well, I think the scariest number in all of that, and I'm fortunate that both of my kids have left, and neither one of them are coming back, thank God. But I think that's the scariest number of all, when you start looking at that number of people who are continuing to live with their parents. That age is getting older and older. If nothing scares people, especially the quote-unquote soccer mom, it ought to be that number, that, hey, your kids are going to live with you until they're 35. I mean, that ought to be terrifying, if nothing else. But, you know, I think we can go on. These are really sobering statistics. I know that we've worked as a council with the manager's office to try to bring that some of that data consistently into some of our presentations that are done by Development Services, so that we're continuing to tell this story now over and over again, so that the residents are hearing it. You being here tonight brings some credibility to that. It's not just a bunch of city people sitting around getting smart. That, you know, we're hearing it, you know, from those that are studying it. And I only hope that we as a council retain the strength and courage that we have shown, particularly in the last 12 months, in approving multifamily projects, that we continue to do that. We've had some difficult public events, meetings, and we've had a lot of opposition, and we have retained our confidence and our courage to say, no, we need to approve these anyway. And I think moving those forward. So I hope we continue to do that. I hope that our staff continues to encourage some of those transitions in the right areas, and that we're open to it, because I don't believe that home purchases is going to be the solution, at least in the short term. I think it's going to be rental for a whole host of reasons. So again, thank you for the information.
Councilmember Keenum.
Well, Nico and Wendy, thanks for coming out, and thank you for your work with Home Arizona and being advocates for housing. Elliot, your presentations are always fascinating. So much information goes real fast, but I appreciate that we had a chance to see it. To the point where this has been an issue in Goodyear, and certainly we've had a lot of pushback, as been said, and so this helps to us to reinforce the data. Certainly when you look at police, fire, teachers, legitimate careers that people who need housing, and we're starting to see a lot more diversity of housing products too. Not all the single family rentals look like bungalows, or they're changing it up, which is really helpful. So it's not repetitious, and we certainly appreciate that. I think what the definition of affordable is that came up is very, very helpful too. I'm wondering if there's any cities or regions who are doing a really good job. I mean, everybody's having the same supply chain issues, labor issues. I read about Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth. I mean, a lot of places. I mean, everything is building, and it's so interesting because most everybody in Arizona did come from somewhere else. And here we all are, and have to make room for others. But I'm just wondering, is there anybody doing a great job?
It's not that others are doing well, it's that we're doing worse. The supply-demand imbalance is greater here. The Case-Shiller Index is one of the best measures of housing prices throughout the country, and it's something that Phoenix didn't want to be number one in. Last year, they claimed Phoenix was the number one market in terms of increase in housing prices at 32.5%. So relative affordability is shrinking versus those other cities because they might have been up 20, 22%, we're up 32%. And again, anything that can start to mitigate that huge imbalance, and again, we're almost a victim of our own success. 90,000 people a year is a lot of people, and they have to live somewhere. But other places aren't doing as badly, but the huge increase in housing prices is prevalent in any place that's growing. If you go to Detroit or someplace in Indiana, not so much. But and in fact, in Los Angeles, housing prices still going up. They're losing like hundreds of thousands of people a year. But really, it's those places that have been economically successful but underbuilt that are facing this problem, which is the Texas cities, Salt Lake, Denver, Florida, Atlanta, places like that. Places, no offense, places you want to live. I think if you go to North Dakota, you'll be just fine.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Bray.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Paul, for coming. Great information. I don't think any of it's any secret whatsoever. I think you pointed out the 7 things to fix the problem, right? And that being said, in some of the remarks going around today, I would think that it might be prudent that this council ask the staff, whether Julie or maybe Chris, to reach out to the Home Builders Association and think about developing a work session from them, saying, hey, we've looked at Goodyear, here's maybe some solutions. If there are any, I don't know that there's anything that stands out, but it would be interesting, I think, for council to hear from that organization to see, what their kind of peek into this window is.
Councilmember Campbell.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm amazed every day where I live that the houses go up for sale before the sign. It's word of mouth, and it's 50 to 75,000 over their asking, and the sign never went in the yard. Unless you're making a lot of money, you can't afford to get in the housing market.
Yeah.
And I really think that we as a council and as a city, we have a duty to provide adequate housing for all of our residents somehow. I don't know what the definition of low income is. You can use the federal low income, but is it really low income? Because every parent, every family now has 2 parents that work, because that's the only way they can make ends meet. And it's so hard because then their children do not have a stay-at-home mom like a lot of us did years ago. And I know that I have friends who their children live, of course, they're adults. I shouldn't call them children, but they were kids at one time. They're in apartments, but they're raising their rates on them. So they're moving out, trying to find a more reasonable place to live. And there's not any by where they live now. So they are moving far out. They're moving away. And then they'll have that drive time to do too. So I just think that we have to continue to work with the developers that come into our city. And most of the apartments and the mini homes that they're building, the rents are expensive. They're not cheap rents.
Yes.
In fact, I don't know of any place in Goodyear we have an area that the rents are cheap, unless you were folks that, well, it's not even rent. It's if your house payment was cheaper when you bought it years and years ago and you've kept the same low interest rate. But interest rates are going to rise. Insurance is rising. All of the utilities are rising. And some of our people are being forced out of their houses. So we need the apartments and we need some type of homes for them to go to. You can still get a reasonably priced home in Texas. That's why people are going there. For whatever reason, they don't have a state income tax. That's interesting to them. But you can get a reasonably large home for under $350,000 there. So I think that's why some of the employers are going there. But if you look at our market, I don't know that you can find reasonably priced housing. And we want the economic development, but we also have to provide affordable housing for the workers. And we want them to live in our city and not commute in.
Yes.
So please just keep giving us the figures as you get them so that we can stay aware of what the housing market looks like. And then we'll continue to work together as a council and try to solve it for our city, for our residents.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Manager, do you have something you want to add?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a couple of comments based on some recent presentations that I've done that ties into some of the conversations. So right now we show about 13% of the housing inventory in Goodyear is multifamily. And with everything that we know is in the queue, that will be about 18% as those are built. Our average rent in Goodyear is about $1,700 per month. And we're showing about a 96% occupancy rate. There was a recent article in the Phoenix Business Journal that there were 20 applicants for every apartment in the region, and we're certainly seeing similar numbers here in Goodyear. Councilmember Bray did talk about a study session or a work session that might include the home builders and perhaps some other information. I did want to see if that was an interest from at least 3 council members or the mayor to bring back another work session.
I think there's value in that. Yeah, I think you got enough of a consensus here.
And what did you say the percentage was of?
So in the region, studies I believe are showing 96% occupancy rate, which only means a 4% vacancy rate and 20 applications for every apartment.
Wow. Oh my
And the
goodness.
1,700, is that for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom?
That's the average in Goodyear. In my presentation, I had the notes as to what the 1-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom was, but just in Goodyear overall, we were showing about, I think it was $1,740 per month was the average rent.
That could be a house payment somewhere.
It is absolutely more than I think many people who were able to buy their homes before the prices increased.
Well, before we go in there, just a couple things I want to say, and make sure you get the consensus that you want there for the manager is, first of all, I appreciate the presentation and the numbers that back up that we can have because, some of the council members have mentioned here, some of the information we need as, we get the public hearings and the, I wouldn't say pitchforks, but, the people in the audience that, are not happy because of where the apartments are. So some of the information you have on the need on there. But again, to me, some of the biggest challenge is some of the things that are out of our realm. That's why maybe to sit down with some of the builders or stakeholders, figure out what we can do to make them more affordable. I got something from a friend the other day on the inflation. And even though the nation average is set 9.1, he sent me a report that says Phoenix is 10.9, okay? Phoenix is 10.9. All right. So even though you hear a lot of stuff on the news about this 8.1, 8.2, whatever that number is, you drill down into each individual city and we're at the top end there. And then you have interest rates on the rise. It's over 4 now. I think it was 4.7 Does that sound about right? And it looks like it's going to keep going up, which means the affordability is going to get worse. And I know time's money, and we try our best with our staff to try to streamline the process to get these processes, projects through to help save some money there. But we're pushing a little uphill with the 10.9 and with the interest rates. So it would be nice to see if there are some ideas out there from the housing or even a multi, what we can do from a structural standpoint. And I don't have any answer, I'm no engineer, of how we can do to try to mitigate some of these, because we got some issues that are pushing against us already started, as I had mentioned. But I really appreciate the information that you're sending us and getting for us, because it's very helpful, especially when we're out there in the community. There's a lot of misconception out there about apartments, a lot of misconception, and we're constantly trying to clarify that with them as well out there, too. So I hear you. And not only that, with gasoline prices the way they are, if you can get those nurses or doctors that work at these hospitals to live here, that's more money they have in their pocket to pay for rent, too. So all that stuff kind of adds in there. So with that, you were looking for consensus?
Correct. Just wanted to make sure either the mayor can call for a work session or 3 council members.
Yeah, there's 4 of us.
Looks like
5 of
there's,
us.
Well, I'm in, so we're all
5,
good,
6.
so.
that's good. We'll get that scheduled.
I'm wondering if we might include some information from planning and zoning as well, since they're on the front line of all this, all these,
I don't
I'm
know.
in.
I don't think.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I will get you, we have a lot of information on the demographics of who's in apartments, their income levels, what they do, their ages, and that might help you dissipate some
It
of the.
would. Because there's a lot of misnomer who's in them. So if you get us some stats on that, I believe that'll be very helpful to
We'll
us.
get them for you.
Yeah, I mean,
Mayor.
Yes.
oh, I was just gonna mention, I mean, for that work session, his point, the solution is building. I think from the homeowner association, it might be as a process that we can streamline from the city's perspective to make things easier to build quicker. Other than that, I don't know how we can affect the supply chain or try to get other things here, but I don't mind having the work session. I'm just thinking of how we as a city can move things forward other than building or helping to build.
Well, you see the old saying, 2 heads are better than 1. So if we get enough people around the table, maybe we solve this issue. Yes, Wally?
I know you might have heard this, Mr. Pollock, but a lot of the pushback we receive are folks who are moving in here from New York, New Jersey. They've been in the big apartments and they've had a big crime waves. They've had just terrible experiences, and they think that's going to happen to us here. And every time we have those folks meet, our chief of police gets up and tells what our crime rate is and how we mitigate whatever. So that's really, I think it's just hard sometimes to be able to talk to those folks and get them to understand why we're different and how we're going to be different.
Yeah, my suggestion is they should tour some of these new apartments, because some of these new
They're
apartments are just gorgeous.
They are, yes, you're right. So,
You want to close it up there, Councilmember Stipp?
Yeah, I think I just kind of want to piggyback a little bit on Vice Mayor Hampton's comments, and I'm going to look in the manager's direction. I don't think we should be having a work session where we're negotiating with the Home Builders Association on what we can do with our staff processes. I think that is treading in the manager's jurisdiction. So if we have a defined piece of what we want to do from that, that's great from a policy perspective. But I think maybe asking staff to look at the processes, because they're going to come in and say, well, cut out all your regulation and just let us come in and blow through plans. That's the fastest way to get houses built, and that's not what we want to do. So I'm asking, Mayor, that since you obviously control the agenda, to please work very carefully with the manager to make sure that we aren't going to sit here and negotiate with the Home Builders Association to do Christopher's work for him.
No, there was no intent of that, Councilmember
I know,
Stipp.
but
So we'll make sure it's clarified with the manager, that's covered. The whole idea, like I said, put multiple heads to figure out how we can address that, since we're pushing uphill on interest rates, inflation, gas prices, the whole 9 yards of what we can do to do that. But no, I appreciate those comments. With that, we have a regular meeting immediately following this. So I'm going to bang the gavel. No further business discussed. This one's adjourned. Now we can